What if the chaos happening around the world right now was never random? What if the wars, fear, division, and uncertainty were already warned about thousands of years ago? The Bible contains passages that many people today are revisiting with growing curiosity and concern. Nation will rise against nation. Kingdom against kingdom. For centuries, these words sounded distant, symbolic, almost impossible to imagine on a global scale. But now, turn on the news. Everywhere you look, there is tension. Wars expanding, nations threatening one another, economic fear rising, and people divided politically, spiritually, and emotionally. For many, one question keeps returning. Did the Bible predict times like these? Throughout history, humanity has always experienced conflict. Empires rise, empires fall, and nations fight for power. But what makes this era feel different? It's the scale, the speed, and the constant pressure. Never before have billions of people been connected in real time, watching global fear unfold simultaneously. One conflict begins in one part of the world, and within minutes, the entire planet knows. Fear spreads instantly. Uncertainty spreads instantly. And suddenly, people begin searching for answers, not political answers, but spiritual answers. Because during uncertain times, humanity naturally starts asking deeper questions. Why is this happening? Where is the world heading? And perhaps, most importantly, was this already foretold? In the Bible, especially in prophetic passages, there are repeated warnings about periods of instability. Before major changes in human history, wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, famine, division, moral confusion, and fear spreading among nations. Regardless of how different people interpret prophecy, one thing is undeniable. These passages continue to capture attention during moments of global crisis. Because they speak directly to human anxiety, the fear that the world is becoming unstable. The Bible repeatedly describes humanity falling into cycles of pride, violence, corruption, and spiritual confusion. And when those cycles intensify, societies begin breaking apart. Before major collapses, warning signs always appeared first. Division increased. Truth became harder to recognize. People became consumed by power, greed, fear, and survival. And eventually destruction followed. That is why many people today compare modern events to ancient prophetic warnings. Because history feels like it is repeating itself again. But biblical prophecy was never meant only to create fear. It was meant to wake people up spiritually and warn humanity about the direction it was heading. And perhaps that is why these verses feel so relevant today, because people sense something changing, even beyond politics, economics, and headlines. There is a growing feeling across the world that humanity itself feels unstable. Relationships are weaker, trust is lower, anger spreads faster, and people are more connected digitally, yet more isolated emotionally. Strangely, the Bible warned about this too. It described a time when love would grow cold, when people would become lovers of themselves, and when truth itself would become difficult to recognize. For many people, those words feel less theoretical today and more personal because modern life often feels emotionally exhausting. Constant conflict, constant outrage, and constant fear. This creates something dangerous: spiritual numbness. People become overwhelmed, desensitized, and disconnected, and once people become spiritually numb, they stop questioning where society is heading. That is why the Bible constantly emphasizes awareness, not panic. Because fear alone changes nothing, but awareness changes perspective. Throughout history, civilizations believed they were stable, right before collapse. Ancient empires looked powerful until suddenly they were gone. Babylon, Rome, kingdoms that once seemed unstoppable eventually disappeared into history. And the Bible repeatedly reminds humanity of one uncomfortable truth: human power never lasts forever. No nation, no empire, no political system, everything temporary eventually changes. And perhaps that is why modern conflicts feel so unsettling. Because deep down, people realize how fragile the world actually is. One war can affect economies globally. One crisis can reshape millions of lives. One moment can change history forever. And this uncertainty drives many people back toward spirituality because when the future feels unstable, people search for something eternal, something unshaken, something beyond human systems. That is one reason biblical prophecy continues attracting attention during periods of crisis. Not because people only want predictions, but because people want meaning. They want to know whether history is random or part of something larger. And the Bible presents history as deeply connected to human choices. Violence has consequences. Greed has consequences. Corruption has consequences. Societies ignoring truth eventually face instability. This idea appears repeatedly throughout Scripture, not merely as punishment, but as cause and effect. When humanity becomes consumed by pride and power, destruction follows naturally. And perhaps that is what makes modern events feel so emotionally heavy, because many people sense humanity repeating old mistakes again. Division increasing, hatred increasing, fear increasing, fear increasing, technology amplifying everything faster than ever before. The Bible never promised the world would become easier over time. In many passages, it warned the opposite: that confusion would grow, false voices would spread, and people would struggle to distinguish truth from deception. And maybe that is one of the greatest fears today: not just war itself, but confusion. Not knowing who to trust, what is true, or where the world is heading. And uncertainty creates anxiety. That is why so many people today revisit ancient prophecy videos, Bible passages, and spiritual discussions online. Because during unstable times, humanity searches for clarity. But the deeper message many people miss is this: the Bible's warnings were never meant only to create fear. They were meant to create reflection, to force humanity to examine itself. Because the greatest danger is not only external conflict, it is internal collapse, a world losing empathy, losing morality, and losing spiritual direction. And perhaps that is the real warning hidden inside biblical prophecy. Not simply that wars would happen, but that humanity itself would become spiritually lost. And when societies lose spiritual direction, conflict increases naturally. 'Cause without truth, people become divided. Without compassion, people become cold. Without meaning, people become desperate. And desperate societies become unstable. That is why the Bible constantly calls people back toward awareness, wisdom, and spiritual grounding. Not because fear saves humanity, but because truth can guide it. And maybe that is why these ancient passages still feel so powerful today, because despite all modern technology, human nature has not changed. Humanity still struggles with pride, violence, and power, and history continues repeating those struggles again and again. But according to Scripture, warning signs were never meant to destroy hope. They were meant to wake people up before it was too late. And perhaps that is the question people are asking now more than ever before. Are these simply normal cycles of history, or are we witnessing the kind of warnings the Bible described long ago? Because one thing is certain, the world feels different, and deep down, people know it.